How do you describe the daily life of people nobody is allowed to meet? North Sentinel is about the size of Manhattan. The people living on it have turned away almost every visitor for as long as anyone has kept records. Yet we know what they eat, what they build, and how they fish. Every scrap of that knowledge was paid for. When most people hear about North Sentinel, they picture a Stone Age tribe. Human beings frozen in time, living exactly as their ancestors lived, untouched by anything the modern world has ever built. That picture is wrong, and a shipwreck proves it. In 1981, a cargo ship called the Primrose ran aground on the reef off the island. The crew was airlifted to safety. The vessel stayed, rusting on the coral. And in the years that followed, observers noticed that the arrows had changed. The tips were metal. The islanders had stripped iron out of that wreck and worked it into arrowheads and adze blades. Survival International, which works with indigenous peoples around the world, rejects the Stone Age label directly, and this is the reason. When an enormous piece of unfamiliar technology landed on their reef, they took it apart and upgraded their weapons with it. These are not people who stopped. They are people who chose. North Sentinel lies in the Bay of Bengal in the Andaman chain, administered by India. It covers roughly 60 square kilometers, measuring about 7.8 kilometers by 7, which puts it in the same size bracket as Manhattan. Its coastline runs 31.5 kilometers. It rises to 122 meters at the center. Apart from a thin white ring of beach, it is forest from edge to edge. That canopy is why aircraft passing overhead see almost nothing. A reef surrounds it on nearly every side, and there is no natural harbor anywhere on that coast. A vessel of any size cannot come in. It must stop in open water and stay there. The nearest large town is Port Blair, roughly 50 kilometers east across the sea. If you boarded a boat there and sailed west, you would be turned back long before you saw the island. Indian law prohibits travel within 5 kilometers of it. Photography is prohibited, and armed patrols hold those waters. The first recorded European sighting came in 1771, when a survey vessel of the East India Company passed at night and logged lights on the shore. Nobody went to investigate. That set the tone for the next 250 years. So the question becomes obvious. If nobody lands, if nobody stays, if nobody has ever recorded a single word of the language, how does anyone know anything at all? Through 3 narrow windows, and each one deserves naming. The first is shipwreck. Vessels have gone onto that reef repeatedly across 2 centuries, and the people aboard them saw things nobody was supposed to see. The second is the air. Aircraft and helicopters have crossed the island, particularly after the tsunami of 2004. The third is a series of expeditions that pulled a small boat onto the sand, put objects down, and withdrew. 3 thin windows, and out of them, a surprising amount. We know what they eat: fish and crabs from inside the reef, mollusks in quantity because roasted shells pile up around their settlements in heaps visible from a boat, wild pig, sea turtle. No sign of agriculture has been found anywhere on that island. Nobody has located a field, a terrace, or a planted row. We have a rough idea what they build: lean-to shelters near the shore and larger huts inland holding several families. Their kit is documented too: bows, arrows, harpoons, adzes, belts, bark cord, necklaces. And we know how they move on the water, which turns out to be the most revealing detail of all. Their canoes are narrow, with an outrigger. They are not paddled, they are poled, standing up, the way you would pole a punt on a river. That means the canoes are built for the shallow water inside the reef, where a man on his feet can reach the bottom. They are not ocean-going vessels. So the same coral that stops the world from arriving also holds the Sentinelese in place. The barrier works in both directions, and it has worked that way for a very long time. How long is a fair question, and the honest answer involves a qualifier. Genetic studies of other Andamanese peoples indicate an ancient lineage that separated early from other Asian populations. You will often see the figure 60,000 years attached to the Sentinelese specifically. Treat that number carefully. What the evidence supports is that these islands hold the longest-running isolations of any human population on record, and that the people on North Sentinel have been left alone longer than anyone else in the chain. So how many of them are there? Nobody knows, and the honesty of that answer is the point. You cannot count people who will not be counted. An official census recorded 39 people in 2001 and counted 15 in 2011, but a head count conducted from a boat is not a census. Anthropologists working from the island's carrying capacity generally put the figure between 50 and 200. The full published range runs from 15 to 500. Before we continue, we would like to know which country you are joining us from. Let us know in the comments below. Now settle in and let us look at what every one of those facts actually cost. The written record begins with a wreck. In 1867, an Indian merchant vessel called the Nineveh struck the reef. Some 106 people made it ashore. Within days, the islanders came for them, and the survivors held them off with whatever they could lift off the beach until a Royal Navy party arrived. That is the pattern in its earliest form. Nobody chose to land. The sea put them there. 13 years later, somebody chose. In 1880, a young Royal Navy officer named Maurice Vidal Portman was placed in charge of the Andamanese for the colonial administration. Portman considered himself an anthropologist. He landed there with naval officers, convicts from the penal settlement, and Andamanese trackers. They found the villages empty. The Sentinelese had watched them coming and gone inland. But 6 of them did not get away. An elderly man, an elderly woman, and 4 children. Portman carried all 6 to Port Blair, the colonial capital. Within a short time, all 6 were seriously ill. The 2 adults died. The 4 children were put back ashore with gifts, and they were still sick when they were landed. Sit with that sequence, because it is the whole story of this island compressed into one paragraph. A man arrives, wanting to learn how these people live. He takes 6 of them. 2 die of an illness they had no defense against. 4 are returned, carrying it. Now put yourself on that beach in the morning, watching a boat come back and put 4 sick children onto your sand. You have watched 6 of your people taken. 2 are not in the boat. You have no word for what is wrong with them. You only know they went away well and came back like this, and that the people who did it are still out there on the water. We should be precise about what Portman was doing, because it explains a great deal about how the outside world has always approached these islands. He was a colonial official who considered himself a scientist. His method with Andamanese people was to take them, photograph them, measure them, and publish. The Andaman Anthropological Museum in Port Blair still holds his photographs, including images of the Sentinelese children he carried off. That was the first serious attempt to document how these people live. Not observation, removal. Portman never landed there again. He published his photographs, he wrote his papers, he retired with honors. In 1896, a convict escaped the prison at Port Blair on an improvised raft and washed up on that same shore. A search party found his body at the waterline. Then the record goes quiet for 70 years. It restarts in 1967, when an anthropologist with the Anthropological Survey of India, named Triloknath Pandit, led the first officially sanctioned expedition. His team went ashore, found recently occupied huts, left coconuts and cloth and metal utensils, and pulled back. No contact. That became the method. Approach in a dinghy, put gifts on the sand, leave. Over the years, the team learned what worked. Live pigs were speared and buried. Plastic toys were buried too. Metal pots and pans were kept. And coconuts, which do not grow on the island, and which the islanders had no other means of obtaining, were taken every time. Picture the strangeness of that exchange. 2 groups of human beings, 40 meters apart, unable to trade a single word, working out each other's preferences over 2 decades by watching which objects get carried into the trees and which get stabbed. In 1974, a National Geographic crew came along to film a documentary called Man in Search of Man. The gifts went out, the arrows came back. 1 arrow hit the director in the thigh. The man who fired it, according to the accounts, stood on the sand afterwards and did not move. In 1981, the Primrose grounded, and the iron arrived. And then, after more than a decade of monthly and bi-monthly visits, something changed. On the 4th of January 1991, Pandit's team approached with coconuts. Among them was Madhumala Chattopadhyay, an anthropologist who would become the first woman recorded in friendly contact with these islanders. They came into the water. They came without weapons. They came right up to the dinghy, took coconuts by the armful, and touched everything within reach. Chattopadhyay later described it as unbelievable. Not the danger, the fact that they had chosen to come forward. Sit in that boat for a second. You have been rowing to this beach for years. You have put objects down and backed away and watched men with bows watch you go. And now there are people in the water beside your dinghy with their hands on the gunwale, close enough to touch, and not one of them has brought a weapon. 24 years of leaving things at the waterline, and they came out to meet the boat. If their story matters to you, subscribe. Your support helps this channel keep uncovering the places everybody else quietly stopped looking at. Because that opening did not stay open. On a later visit, one of the men made his position unmistakable without speaking. He drew a knife and made a cutting motion in the air. No translator was needed. That gesture means the same thing in every language ever spoken. The relationship never went further than coconuts. They never sent anything back, never invited anyone in, never offered a gift of their own. Armed men still appeared at the tree line on some visits. In 1996, India suspended the contact expeditions entirely, which leaves an uncomfortable question hanging over the whole enterprise. All those visits, all that patience, all those coconuts, was any of it worth doing? The answer was already visible, a few dozen kilometers away on the islands next door. The Sentinelese are not the only indigenous people of the Andaman Islands. They are simply the people who said no. Consider what happened to the ones who did not. The Great Andamanese were once the largest group in the archipelago, made up of about 10 distinct peoples, each with its own language and territory. When the British established a permanent settlement at Port Blair in 1858, estimates of their number ran to around 5,000, with some sources putting the figure lower. Now follow the census. 625 in 1901, 455 in 1911, 207 in 1921, 90 in 1931, 19 people in 1961. Some were killed defending their land, most were not. What did the work was measles, influenza, and syphilis, arriving with people who meant them no particular harm. One detail from that period is harder to shake than the numbers. In the 1860s, the administration established what it called the Andaman Home, a facility for Andamanese who had become friendly with the settlement. It was intended as care. According to accounts from the period, of over 150 infants born in that home, not one survived past the age of 2. Read that again, because the arithmetic of it is the entire point. Not a single child born in a building designed to help them lived to see a second birthday. If you want to understand why men stand on a beach with bows, that number will do it better than anything else in this story. Nobody working there was trying to end a people. There was no policy of extermination, no order given. There was food, shelter, medical attention of a kind, and gifts. And the outcome was that a population which had held those islands for thousands of years was functionally gone inside a century. That is what makes it worth understanding. The danger was never the intent, it was the contact. The Ong, on Little Andaman, were more isolated and did better. One estimate puts them at around 700 in 1858. Today, the figure commonly cited is around 100. The Jarawa held out longer, resisting contact into living memory. Then a road was driven through their territory. So look again at that tree line. For over a century, the standard description of the Sentinelese has been that they are hostile, that they do not understand what is being offered, that they are hiding from a world they cannot comprehend. The record does not support that reading. Every documented arrival from outside brought them something bad. A raid that took 6 of their people and returned 4 of them ill. Ships on their reef. Boats they did not invite. And a few dozen kilometers away, the visible, ongoing outcome for every neighboring group that let outsiders stay. They do not refuse us because they fail to understand what we are. They refuse us because they do. What happened on the 26th of December 2004 supports that reading. A magnitude 9 earthquake off Sumatra sent a tsunami across the region. The Andaman Islands were hit hard. Coastlines moved. On North Sentinel, the land itself was lifted and the reef around it changed shape. Across the whole Andaman and Nicobar chain, something unexpected happened that day. Officials and anthropologists afterwards pointed to the same explanation for why the indigenous groups came through far better than anyone expected. An inherited body of knowledge about the movement of wind, sea, and birds, and the sense to act on it early. Not equipment, not warning systems. Attention, passed down and trusted. When Indian Coast Guard helicopters flew over to check for survivors, they found the islanders alive, apparently in good health, and entirely uninterested in help. A man walked out onto the sand and shot an arrow at the helicopter. That photograph went around the world as an image of hostility. Read it the other way. A people who had just come through the largest earthquakes ever recorded, standing on their own beach, informing an aircraft that they did not require assistance. 2 years later, in 2006, a fishing boat drifted onto the reef while its 2 crew slept. Neither man survived. In November 2018, an American missionary named John Allen Chow paid fishermen to take him there. He had been warned. He went anyway, repeatedly, and on his final attempt, he was killed. Under Indian law, no charges were brought against the islanders. And the pressure now is not from individuals. Elsewhere in the same island chain, the Indian government has been advancing a very large development plan for Great Nicobar. It involves a major port, an international airport, a power station, and a projected settlement of hundreds of thousands of people. Advocacy organizations have described the risk to the indigenous peoples of that island in the strongest terms available to them. Whatever you make of the project itself, the direction of travel is not in dispute. That project does not include North Sentinel, but the island sits inside the same administrative territory, under one government, in a region where the map is being redrawn. These people have survived every ship, every expedition, every well-meaning visitor with a bag of coconuts. None of those things arrive with the construction schedule. At the start, I asked how you describe the daily life of people nobody is allowed to meet. The answer is that you describe it in fragments. A canoe pulled through shallow water. Iron from a wrecked ship on the tip of an arrow. Shells heaped outside a shelter. Coconuts carried up a beach by the armful in 1991 by people who came out unarmed and then changed their minds. All of it was paid for. Some of it by the men who went. Far more of it by the 6 people Maurice Vidal Portman carried off in 1880, and by the 4 who were carried back to it. We tend to tell this story as though the Sentinelese are the ones who do not understand. Look at the census of their neighbors, and then look at the census of North Sentinel, which nobody has ever managed to take. They understood perfectly. They have simply been the only people on those islands with the water, the reef, and the resolve to act on